The airship incidents of the 1890s refer to a series of mysterious sightings of unidentified flying objects, described as airships or dirigibles, that were reported primarily in the United States between 1896 and 1897. These reports were widely covered by newspapers at the time and remain a fascinating topic for UFO enthusiasts, historians, and folklorists. The initial phenomena began in November 1896 in Sacramento, California. Witnesses described seeing a large cigar-shaped airship equipped with wings, lights, and propellers, flying silently at night. Then the sightings began to spread. Reports of similar airships spread across the U.S., particularly the Midwest and in Texas in 1897. In some cases, witnesses claimed to have seen humanoid figures piloting the crafts or heard voices and sounds from the ships. The airships were typically described as advanced flying machines, resembling blimps with bright lights and sometimes strange mechanisms. Witnesses often compared them to the designs of early inventors like Jules Verne, though the technology described far exceeded the capabilities of the time. Some reports claimed some of the airships landed and their occupants interacted with the people on the ground. In Aurora, Texas, in April 1897, it was reported that an airship crashed, killing its pilot. The story even claimed the body of the pilot was not of this world, and local residents buried the being in their local cemetery. The late 19th century was a time of growing fascination with flight, fueled by inventors like the Wright brothers, and working on their heavier-than-air crafts. They also believe it could have been mass hysteria or misinterpretations of ordinary phenomena such as celestial events or experimental balloons might have fueled the sightings. The initial wave of airship sightings took place primarily in California from November 17th through late December 1896, with a few isolated sightings reported during January of 1897. There were also a handful of reports of an airship in Oregon, Washington, and British Columbia. Many newspaper accounts describe the sightings as part of a transcontinental flight by the airship's inventor. The November 18, 1896 editions of the Sacramento Bee and the San Francisco Call published accounts of the first sighting, which had taken place the night before. On the evening of November 17, 1896, citizens of Sacramento reported a bright light moving slowly across the sky at an estimated elevation of 1,000 feet. Some witnesses said they could see a dark shape behind the light. Witness R.L. Lowry claimed that he heard a voice from the craft issuing commands to increase elevation in order to avoid hitting a church steeple. Lowry added in what was no doubt meant as a wink to the reader that he believed the apparent captain to be referring to the tower of a local brewery, as there were no churches nearby. Lowry further described the craft as being powered by two men exerting themselves on bicycle pedals. Above the pedaling men seemed to be a passenger compartment which lay under the main body of the craft. A bright light was mounted on the front end. Some witnesses reported the sound of talking or singing as the light passed overhead. The November 19, 1896 edition of the Stockton, California Daily Mail featured one of the earliest accounts of an alleged alien craft sighting. Colonel H.G. Shaw claimed that while driving his buggy through the countryside of Lodi near Stockton, he came across what appeared to be a landed spacecraft. Shaw described it as having a metallic surface, which was completely featureless apart from a rudder and pointed ends. He estimated a diameter of 25 feet and said the vessel was around 150 feet in total length. Three slender, 7-foot tall, apparent extraterrestrials were said to approach from the craft while emitting a strange warbling noise. The beings examined Shaw's buggy and then tried to physically force him to accompany them back to the airship. The aliens were said to give up after realizing they lacked the physical strength to force Shaw aboard. They boarded their ship, which lifted off the ground and sped out of sight. Shaw believed that the beings were Martians sent to kidnap an Earthling for unknowable but potentially nefarious purposes. This has been seen by some as an early attempt at alien abduction. It is possibly the first published account of explicitly extraterrestrial beings attempting to abduct humans and force them into their spacecraft. The mystery light reappeared over Sacramento on the evening of November 22nd. Among the observers were Sacramento's deputy sheriff and district attorney. After November 23rd, a bunch of different California cities started having sightings. Anderson, Red Bluff, Redding, Yolo, Leandro, San Jose, Acampo, Lodi, Landing, Turlock, and just to name a few. Los Angeles, with public interest in the airship sightings running high, a young San Francisco attorney named George D. Collins came forward and told the newspapers that he represented the mysterious airship's inventor, who disclosed to the attorney that he had been building a large airship at a secret location in Oroville, about 60 miles from Sacramento. Collins stated that the lights seen over Sacramento must have been his client conducting nocturnal test flights before an official unveiling of his secret invention. This explanation seemed reasonable to many and was given extensive coverage in the San Francisco newspapers. After Collins' announcement, rumors and wild tales began to spread, and for several weeks, the Phantom Airship was the biggest news story in Northern California. As sightings and reports of mysterious lights continued to increase throughout the state, Attorney Collins found himself the center of so much attention and ridicule that he came to regret his earlier bragging. The San Francisco Chronicle nicknamed him Airship Collins, and after being hounded by reporters and harassed by cranks and curious busybodies, Collins recanted some of his claims and actually fled into hiding. Around the time Collins began distancing himself from his airship claims, William Henry Harrison Hart, former Attorney General of the state of California, came forth and also claimed to represent the inventor. Hart gave several lengthy interviews to the press, and details concerning the mysterious airship were even more outlandish than those of Attorney Collins. Among them, airship was likely going to be used to bomb Havana, Cuba, and there were actually two airships, one built in California, the other in New Jersey. Like Collins, Hart later modified his earlier stories and eventually stopped talking to the newspapers about his alleged connection to the airship. So basically, those were most likely fabricated stories by the government and planted. The March 28, 1897 edition of the Rocky Mountain News published a report of a sighting in Topeka, Kansas, where several hundred witnesses observed a blood-red light moving slowly across the sky. Some people were reportedly so frightened by the sight that they hid in their storm cellars, fearing that a great calamity was impending. Among the witnesses to the event was Governor of Kansas, John W. Leedy. The first airship sighting in Michigan was on April 10, 1897 at Alma, followed by sightings from Benton Harbor, Holland, Niles, and Mendon, all on April 11th. On April 12th, the airship was seen over Battle Creek and Kalamazoo, Michigan, and an airborne explosion was seen in Pavilion, with alleged airship debris being found there and nearby in Comstock. The next night, a farmer living north of Battle Creek claimed that the airship came within 100 feet of a field on their farm, and a wheel fell off the airship and was embedded in the ground. Sightings peaked around April 15th but continued into early May. After trying unsuccessfully to free the heifer, Hamilton cut loose a portion of the fence, then stood in amazement to see the ship and the cow all rise slowly and sail off. Some have suggested that this was the earliest report of cattle mutilation. In 1977, however, Jerome Clark debunked this story and confirmed via interviews and Hamilton's own affidavit that the story was a successful attempt to win a Liars Club competition to create the most outlandish tall tale. Later sightings in 1909, a series of mystery airship sightings reported around New England, were likely triggered by a hoax by William Tillinghast, who falsely claimed to have invented and flown a heavier-than-air craft from Worcester to New York City. Airship sightings were also reported from New Zealand, Australia, and various European locations, including the United Kingdom, where a hoax by M.B. Boyd similarly triggered the wave of alleged airship sightings. By this time, airship technology had greatly advanced, and several successful powered airships, including Zeppelins, had been built and flown. There had been 47 powered flights in 1909, and hundreds of news articles about aeronautics, so wide-ranging airship claims likely appeared plausible to the public. Later reports came from the United Kingdom in 1912 and 1913. Jerome Clark wrote that one curious feature of the post 1897 airship waves was the failure of each to stick in historical memory, although 1909, for example, brought a flood of sightings worldwide and attendant discussion and speculation. Contemporary accounts do not allude to the hugely publicized events of little more than a decade earlier. An account by Alexander Hamilton himself of Leroy, Kansas, supposedly occurred around April 19, 1897, and was published in the Yates Center Farmer's Advocate of April 23rd. Hamilton and his son had a hired hand witness an airship hovering over the cattle pen. Upon closer examination, the witnesses realized that a red cable from the airship had lassoed a heifer, but had also become entangled in the pen's fence. After trying unsuccessfully to free the heifer, Hamilton cut loose a portion of the fence, then stood in amazement to see the ship and the cow all rise slowly and sail off. Some have suggested that this was the earliest report of cattle mutilation. Airship sightings were also reported from New Zealand, Australia, and various European locations, including the United Kingdom. So many believe that the great airship mystery was actually a more advanced civilization planting seeds within our consciousness to gain us or influence us to work to achieve flight, to plant this idea in our heads so we would work towards that goal. And what did we do? We learned how to fly. Now, these craft are much more advanced than we've ever seen. They can generally hover, they fly very fast, they have EMPs, super advanced tech, and they can seem to disappear on a whim. We haven't really experienced anything quite like it, and they're not being bashful about showing themselves, whoever they are. Do I believe that some of these are government craft? I do. I do believe that they have much more advanced technology than they ever show. The government has had the ability to create anti-gravity drones for quite some time now. I think they're just softening the public up, possibly, and this is just my theory or my opinion. Stay in the love, stay in the light, be kind to others, y'all. I am out.